Greetings. I am Dr. Graciela Caneiro Livingston, Provost at Nebraska Wesleyan University. I want to welcome you to this year's presentation of Spooky Evenings. We here at Nebraska Wesleyan are excited and proud of this event that brings together scholars, artists, authors, and filmmakers to discuss the topic of horror in its various manifestations across the arts and the humanities. Professor Juan Jose Castaño Marquez and Dr. Matthew Jarvis have been working tirelessly to bring you the best scholarship in the field of horror through this unparalleled digital humanities event. I would like to acknowledge the generous support from the Nebraska Arts Council, Humanities Nebraska, and the Nebraska Cultural Endowment that helps make quality programming like Spooky Evenings possible. Again, welcome and enjoy this presentation of Spooky Evenings.
Tonight on Spooky Evenings, Clay McLeod Chapman, author of Extreme Carnage and Scream, Curse of Carnage, discusses horror in comics.
And we're live.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight, my return guest, Clay McLeod Chapman. Welcome back, sir.
I can't believe you have me back. Thank you very much for opening the invitation once again.
I feel like I should have greeted you with "All hail the Possum King," which is what I call you.
I mean, I thought that was our little private thing, but now that it's out there, I totally understand. I get it.
Private because it's buried in a 2.5-hour interview.
It's funny because total sidebar right out of the gates, but VHS 94, the new installment of the VHS franchise, found footage horror film. On Shudder, streaming right now. They have the opening segment is basically a under like a cellar dweller sewer rat god, and they all say "Hail Ratma," like Ratma, otherwise known as Rat Man. But as I was watching this, it harkened back to our Possum King conversation, and
you're saying they owe us royalties, is what I'm hearing.
If only.
I have not returned to the land of the horses since our last speaking, but you've been down in Virginia since we last spoke.
Yeah. There was like a little blitz of book touring, and I have family down there, so I try to go back every chance I get. And luckily I get to take work with me on my back wherever I go. So it was, you can take the boy out of the South, but you can't take the South out of the boy. And I have to go back every so often, get replenished, as it were.
It's a new type of Southern vampire, right? Returning to the home soil.
Total sidebar again. Richmond, Virginia. We have something called the Vampire of Richmond, otherwise known as the Hollywood Vampire, for Hollywood Cemetery, which is located in Richmond, Virginia. It's our very famous cemetery. And apparently, the legend goes there is a vampire that actually walks through the cemetery, someone by the name of W.W. Poole. And you can look at his mausoleum in Hollywood Cemetery, but don't be there at midnight because he'll come out and suck your blood.
Is this a future story for you?
it's a little bit of a spoiler, but yeah, I've been writing about it.
Look at that. See,
Yeah.
I'm clairvoyant tonight. That the candles give me extra powers. We had a guest think that these weren't real.
I mean, I'm looking at
they're clearly real, right?
I mean, you could be doing some digital CGI trickery, and I would
Juan
totally
is just that good with the CGI.
I believe it. I believe it.
So tonight we're going to discuss horror comics, horror pop culture, horror and Clay McLeod Chapman, horror and pumpkins.
Yeah, it's, in all honesty, it's such a pleasure because the last time we had a conversation was about Whisper Down the Lane. In the time since then, I was very, very fortunate to take part in a Marvel Comics summer mini event called Extreme Carnage, which was a family reunion of all the symbiotes there. I don't know for any of those out there watching, if you're fans of Venom or Carnage or any of the other symbiotes that Marvel has cranked out over the years. But it was a fun time where I and three other authors basically got to tackle an 8-issue series and tell this kind of massive, summer blockbuster with parasites, alien extraterrestrial parasites, as you do.
As you do. You had the first one.
Actually, I had the second. Yeah, second. It was the second and the fourth. Okay. There was oh my gosh, am I going to get all the names right? It was Philip Kennedy Johnson. He did the first and the last. And Marvel was this was interesting. And, I think Marvel is doing this a lot more frequently. This was my first time doing it because it was a larger event. But we were kind of taking part in what was essentially a writer's room. And the four writers that were involved, Philip Kennedy Johnson, Steve Orlando, and Alyssa Wong, we all, and myself, we and our editors kind of climbed into a virtual room together and basically kind of cracked this story arc over the course of 8 issues. And, editorial would basically kind of weigh in. But Philip was kind of, if we're going to use the kind of TV series analogy, like he was technically our showrunner, where he wrote the first episode and then kind of made sense of what the rest of us had done at the end and wrote the final episode, the 8th issue of the series.
Okay.
But yeah, I was on the hook for 2 and 4.
Okay. One of them's over your left shoulder right now.
Am I going to do this right? Am I going to?
There you go.
That's, yeah. It's strange. And I feel very, very fortunate. My kind of tenure with Marvel has been a rather kind of happy accident. And, from the moment I started to, getting to write for symbiotes, but Scream, which, you're going to forgive me. I'm going to do a little show and tell. But Scream is kind of my most recent, not most recent, but the kind of most investment I've had at Marvel recently, where I had an ongoing series with her, which unfortunately got canceled because of coronavirus. And when the comics industry kind of shut down, I was one of the casualties of that. But I guess the way to kind of backtrack is that like my time at Marvel has basically been it's just total like good fortune, good luck, where I taught a creative writing workshop to high school students back in like 2002, maybe 2001. I mean, this is going back at least 20 years. And it was in the state of Virginia. And, about 10, maybe 15 high school students from around the state came together. And I got to, work on playwriting with them. It was a playwriting workshop. And one of those students graduated high school, went to college down in Savannah, like the Savannah College of Art and Design, SCAD. Yep. And then graduated from there, and then moved up to New York and got an internship, I believe, at Marvel. And kind of, she found her way into the Marvel industry that way. She worked her way up from editor, intern to associate editor, assistant editor, whatever the kind of hierarchy of editorship goes. Like, she basically kind of worked her way through. And I hadn't seen her for years. And then, like, fast forward to like 2011, she came to a reading that I was doing in New York in the Bowery. And she just kind of popped up afterwards, and she was like, "Hey, I live here now, and I work at Marvel now, and you taught me in this workshop years and years ago. Have you ever wanted to write for Spider-Man?" And whenever somebody asks you that question, you say, "Yeah, totally, for sure." And I basically had lunch, had a meeting with her boss, who at that point was Steve Wacker. And it was amazing. Like, I got to basically pitch stories for, forgive me, I'm going to do this. I got to pitch stories for for Spider-Man. And one of my very first comics was actually a Spider-Man horror comic. It was for, I got to do the Halloween issue.
Nice.
It was basically like, I got to write the back nine stories, like the B story. So like, Spider-Man learns to do his laundry, or like, say no to drugs, kids, like those kinds of stories. But I, wherever Ellie, this editor, went, she would occasionally reach out and be like, "Hey, do you want to do this? Do you want to write this or for this?" And I would always say yes. And it led to dovetailing quite nicely into Edge of Spider-Verse. That summer leading up to the movie, Spider-Verse was the big thing. And, everybody was doing Spider-Verse stuff. And there was this 5-issue prequel series called Edge of Spider-Verse. And they each issue was a different author writing about a different alternate version of Spider-Man. And Ellie asked me if I'd be interested in doing the kind of horror movie version of Spider-Man. And that led to me writing issue 4, which was basically like Tales from the Crypt version of Peter Parker's lifestyle. So like, imagine Peter Parker not being Peter Parker, not being a good guy, but being like a kind of like a sociopath. And he gets bit by a radioactive spider and turns into monster Spider-Man. And it, to this day, this is like one of my favorite comics, because they really let us go to town with it. And it's basically like, what if, Peter Parker was like obsessed with Mary Jane across the way in an unhealthy way. And it just gets really gross. It came out in like, what was that? Whenever, years and years ago. But it still remains like one of my personal faves. And like, just because like I suddenly became kind of like the horror, like one of the many horror guys they have over there, where if they ever said like, "Hey, we need someone to write a one-off issue, which is kind of spooky, scary. Can you do it?" And I always say yes. Long story short, forgive me. But that led to my first delving in with the parasites, the venoms, and the symbiotes with this comic, which was a part of the Absolute Carnage series, where I basically got to write my fan letter to the Thing, as if it were a domestic kind of drama, family drama between a family of 4 that was getting kind of torn apart, but they're healed back together again by these particular symbiotes, the Life Foundation, which is Agony, Riot, Phage, and Lasher. So that that is a long-winded way of saying, because of this comic, I got to start writing for Scream. And Marvel basically gave me the keys to the car for this series for as long as it lasted. And it was a total blast. Like, I just love, I got to write for one character for, you know, I've been writing for Scream for like over 2 years now, which is pretty wild.
All right. You did something very horror. I mean, my own little detour here, probably some horror fans out there screaming as you took the comic out of the plastic you had stored it in.
I know. These are mine. Like,
it is.
I mean, maybe this will pay for somebody's college tuition a few years from now.
You got your 2 sons, right?
Yeah. I would be so lucky if any of these become valuable beyond my own kind of personal, like, hey kids, you want to see what your dad wrote? No, dad, stop putting your comics on us, pushing your crap.
Your lifestyle.
I know.
Your Spider-Verse lifestyle.
Yeah. Hey, did I ever tell you the time I wrote for Spider-Man? Yes, Dad, you told us oodles of times. We get it. You wrote for Spider-Man once.
So your kids aren't going to go as Carnage and Venom for Halloween? No? Not going to happen?
No, at this point, they've decided to be, my oldest wants to be the Headless Horseman.
Okay.
It's really great. I think
I saw that on Instagram, maybe.
Yes. We watched the Disney, the kind of the Ichabod Crane legend of Sleepy Hollow.
Sleepy Hollow, part of Mr. Toad's Wild Adventures.
Yeah. It took some digging to find it, and I kept coming back to that Mr. Toad and Ichabod Crane, and I was like, why? Like, I completely blanked that the two of them had been fused together. But yeah, so we fast forwarded through Mr. Toad and just got, Wind in the Willows, whatever. Let's get to Ichabod.
It's actually one of the more accurate renditions of that. Speaking of not a comic per se, but a cartoon horror story.
Yeah.
It is one of the more accurate tellings of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow on film.
I don't know, that Bing Crosby, those musical numbers seem to, it gets a little kind of boozy, jazzy, which I always find funny. But it was a total blast to watch it again. I haven't seen it since I was a kid. I was personally terrified of it as a child. So seeing it now was nothing. And my son was just completely like, what would there ever be? Why would you ever be scared of this? And I was like, but no, do you see the pumpkin and the, like, and he was just like,
nope,
I've been battling Minecraft zombies for far too long to be scared of your Bing Crosby Headless Horseman.
So which version of the Headless Horseman does he want to be? Is he the Christopher Walken? Is that what he's looking for?
I have no idea the kind of genesis of it, other than every year I live in New York, and we're just a hop, skip, and car ride away from Sleepy Hollow. So every year for the last, since he was a little baby, we've gone up to Sleepy Hollow for the Halloween season, because there's this amazing event called the Pumpkin Blaze, and it's basically like 1,000 jack-o'-lanterns just kind of strewn throughout Sleepy Hollow, and you just kind of walk around and look like, oh, there's a pumpkin, oh, there's a pumpkin, everywhere is a pumpkin,
everywhere.
Yeah.
So he wanted to become one with them.
Yeah, I think he just because there is like a Sleepy Hollow, you go up there and it's like a cottage industry, like they milk that.
Same in Salem, right?
It's true.
So speaking of childhood, I want to do a transition here. Speaking of childhood, what were the horror comics you got into as a kid? Where did that start? Or were you not a comics kid?
No, I was a comics kid. I feel like I was a kind of like one step removed comics kid. Like I didn't necessarily collect the superhero comics. And I don't know if this is profane or not, and I'll totally show my age with this, but like my gateway into comics was Tim Burton's 1989 Batman.
Oh, okay.
I watched that at an age where it just like completely changed my life. Like I honestly saw that movie at least 5, if not 8 times in the movie theater. Like it was that first thing of like wanting to just just experience it over and over and over again. And there was something about Jack Nicholson's Joker that just like it was just totally eye-opening. And I think the best thing we can say about these movies, these comic book movies, is that hopefully maybe they'll lead audience members back to the comics, that they'll become readers of the comics. And it did for me. But I had a weird, I didn't have someone else to educate me, and I didn't have anyone else to kind of police me. So when I started reading, I was like, oh my God, I love Batman. I want to read Batman comics. So I went to whichever, the local comic book shop, and I was like, I want more Batman. And they were like, here's The Killing Joke by Alan Moore. Here's the Dark Knight Returns by, Frank Miller. Here's, Gotham by Gaslight, or even, what was Arkham? Was it Arkham Asylum by Alan Moore? Not Alan Moore. Grant Morrison, and Dave McKean. Like comics that like were mind blowing, because they're all Batman stories, but they are they are heavily like deep into the psychology of vigilantism. And it for me, being the 10, 11, 12-year-old, and kind of experiencing those stories, it was terrifying. It was astounding. It was eye-opening and jaw-dropping and just profoundly upsetting, because I didn't have yet the emotional makeup to comprehend the brutality and the emotional rawness of those stories, particularly The Killing Joke. The Killing Joke, it's an awfully amazing comic, because it goes there. And I don't think I was ready to go there, and I did. I had to. I had it in front of me. So that started me. And then somewhere along the way, I got into, as a horror film fan, growing into my horror film fandom, I was always astounded by how particular movies had comic book spin-offs. So there were always like the adaptations, but they were like alternate narratives. Like I remember when Child's Play 2 came out. Amazing movie. Is that the
poster with the Jack in the Box?
Yes. It's it's a great movie. Written by a fellow Richmonder, by the way. I remember going to the comic book shop and seeing a comic, like a Child's Play comic, and I was like, oh my God, they made the movie into a comic. So I picked it up and I was like, this is not Child's Play 2. This is not any Child's Play. This is just a totally different story. And in that moment, I was like, oh my God, you can take Chucky and have all these other further adventures with Chucky. Like, that's astounding. And they did it with Leatherface. They did it with Jason Voorhees. And there would always be these kind of like independent, like maybe not Dark Horse, or maybe not, Vertigo. Like they were kind of like, these guys over here, like they're making the Friday the 13th comics. And they almost felt like fan fiction. Like they almost felt like they were not officially, like somehow legally sanctioned by
this is how I feel. I feel this way about the novelization of the first Halloween movie.
Yeah.
It's just so wild and out there because like he's being fueled by druid magic and things, and his size changes at one point. And
Oh
things
my
like, what
God.
is this?
In the first one, part one.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
the novelization of it.
Oh my God. Because don't they always have access to like a draft of the shooting script? Like there's like a version of the script.
Yeah, they just
That,
we don't need that.
yeah.
I mean, I
But it
think
was
of
always,
it. Go ahead.
no, you go for it.
Oh, I mean, I think of it as like one of these pulp paperbacks almost, and the stories that
Yeah.
Grady Hendrix is so obsessed with paperbacks from hell.
Yeah.
Like I think of it being one of
Valentine.
those. He keeps
Oh,
posting
totally.
those, and I'm like, I need to read some of this weird stuff. I don't have any time to read it, but I kind of want to.
Oh my God, there's so many good ones. I actually just finished one of his paperbacks from hell, The Auctioneer by Joan Sampson, I think it is. It's a heartbreaking story. This woman, Joan Sampson, writes one novel, New York Times bestseller, does extremely well, like millions of copies sold, movie option, everything happens. And I think a few months later, at the age of 38, she dies of cancer. And only one book. This was her one book, big splash. Movie never happened. Nothing like, I don't know what the kind of dovetailing is, but everything just disappears. But this book kind of starts to resurface and bubbles up. Like it goes out of print for decades. And you know, whoever, whether it's Grady Hendrix or whether it's someone else, but like the book comes back, it resurfaces, and Valancourt
Okay.
Publishing,
Yeah.
also in Richmond, Virginia, by the way. They they are basically kind of single-handedly responsible for republishing all of the paperbacks from hell for Grady. And one of them is The Auctioneer. It's a beautiful book. It's like, you know, the Shirley Jackson book that she never wrote. But it totally it has like total lottery vibes going through it. It's so worth it.
It's interesting too. So backtracking a second, I feel like you and I could lead each other down the most winding of paths.
It's almost like we don't want to talk about horror comics, but we're gonna like tug of war, you know?
It is interesting. I don't know if it was the first movie I saw, but it was the '89 Batman was one of the first movies I saw in the movie theaters. My dad took me. Hi, Dad. And I remember watching it at the time. But you know, the thing about that is, if I think on it, it gets to another question I'm interested in. And I don't know if you'll have an opinion or not. Tim Burton has this sort of American Gothic aesthetic. I'm going to give it an additional adjective there to try to spare myself here. And that American Gothic aesthetic, though, gets contrasted with horror quite frequently. And you're from the South, and of course, we think of Southern Gothic as being the predominantly American Gothic style. And I was wondering if you have any thoughts on that in terms of either the legacy of Tim Burton and Batman, and if he influenced it becoming darker in that way, or as being a Virginian and a writer of comics, if there were any influences there on you.
I mean, speaking about Tim Burton, who I was definitely a Tim Burton fan. I would say probably up until Big Fish. I think there was like a moment where he shifted into his like, I am Tim Burton
status.
Yeah,
I'll say it. You don't have to. I'm an academic. I get to say things like that.
I mean, I just remember being, you know, he had a singular voice. He had a singular vision. He was an auteur, even without necessarily being the person to write the screenplays. I think that like he brought the goth back into Gothic. He was like California suburb Gothic. Like his version of Americana certainly wasn't rooted in the South, and certainly wasn't rooted in a sense of Americana as much as it was a sense of suburbia. And I always thought that was really interesting. Like it was distinctly like Pasadena or Sandy, it felt like the sprawl, the suburban sprawl of specifically California, and not my suburbs, not like there was like a distinct kind of vibe to it. And maybe it had something to do with the kind of the sun-kissed quality of it, or the pastelness to it. But I know that that's where he was born and raised. I know that that's what he was kind of, struggling to break out from. But I don't know, like I always find it interesting how like his Gothic qualities were unmoored in the particular regions that we consider our own kind of American Gothic. But he would just kind of like bring his Gothicness with him wherever he was, like a journeyman goth. He was like the Johnny Appleseed of goth. He could just like plop anywhere. And I mean, I think that was kind of I would attribute that to his, early talents for sure. Like Gotham City versus the suburbs of Edward Scissorhands versus, Sleepy Hollow, which felt, if I'm thinking specifically of his movies, Sleepy Hollow was the most region specific, the most it felt like of its environment, because it was of that Sleepy Hollow, Tarrytown, Hammer style kind of horror. And yeah, Big Fish was down south, but that never felt
right.
I don't know. I call slight shenanigans on that, even as a fan of the movie and the book.
You're so diplomatic, Clay.
But you asked me about inspiration, Gothic inspiration in.
Yeah, if there was any, I mean, because we've talked about, particularly with Whisper Down the Lane, I mean, and its relationship to Virginia in some ways. I mean, obviously there's very site-specific relationships to Virginia, and of course Virginia in that time period was very different than Virginia today.
Yeah.
And so I have to wonder, in relationship to your own experience of sort of a relational thing to Southern Gothicness as a kid and growing up and then writing into horror, if there were lingering qualities that came forward in your writing.
I mean, definitely in the fiction writing, like the comic book writing has always been very, it's interesting because, when I write primarily I've written for Marvel, and I feel pretty fortunate for that. But short of recently, I very rarely get to create new characters for Marvel. And I've only done it sparingly. So more often than not, I'm inheriting someone else's character. And when you do that, you're also kind of inheriting a kind of timeline, or a kind of, not a region per se, but like, I mean, for better or for worse, like all of the comics I've written tend to take place in New York. The Scream comics took place in New York. I did one kind of 6-issue maxi series for Iron Fist, and that took place in New York as well. And it was like the horror. I got to write a horror Iron Fist, which was exciting. But they all take place in New York. I haven't necessarily been able to bring a kind of particular regional flair, like my kind of thirst for Southern Gothic hasn't necessarily made its way in. I have done a few creator-owned comics where like I'm the originator of the story, I'm the creator of the story. But those haven't been in Virginia either for some bizarre reason. Maybe I need to do a Virginia comic.
The Richmond vampire needs a comic.
I am pitching.
Tonight I go to the Bird and watch the midnight movie because I'm vampire and it's $5. You can't beat that.
It is $2 now.
Is it $2?
It's $2. Gosh, well, maybe
it's gone up since I was in college, which was not recently.
Yeah, I would love to do a Southern Gothic comic. I pitched recently a
just special thanks, Matt Jarvis.
if a Vampire of Richmond comic does come out, I will.
Maybe like no, I have maybe like a Van Helsing character, but like pro vampire. Like I'm handing out pamphlets and I'm trying to encourage people.
Good evening. My name is Matthew Van Jarvis.
Yeah, exactly.
That was a terrible accent.
It is, but it's fine.
You were gonna let it slide.
I was gonna let it slide. I like self-commentary on one's accents because I do it in class all the time. So. It is interesting. Yeah. So you started you associate yourself with Marvel. You have done a little bit with DC. You actually did a vampire comic for DC.
Oh my God!
Look at that transition.
Yes, I totally take it back. I totally lied to you. I have done one comic in Richmond, Virginia, and it was that vampire comic.
It's American Vampire, right?
American Vampire. That's right. I should have done my homework on myself before doing this. No, a little bit of Richmond history while we're here. In 1811, December 26, 1811, there was the Richmond Theater fire. There was a big playhouse in Richmond, Virginia, 200 people crammed into this one, beautiful space. They were watching a pantomime on stage, and a tapestry caught on fire up above, and there were no fire exits. There was basically one entrance, one exit, and as soon as the building catches on fire, the stage and proscenium catch on fire, everybody just panics, and I think like over 78 people died that night of just it was just awful. It was of its time one of the greater tragedies of the nation, and it kind of echoed out and reverberated throughout the rest of the country, because at that point in religious circles, less people were going to church and more people were going to the theater. And once this theater fire took place, a lot of the churches kind of seized on it and were like, see, this is what happens when you go to the theater. You should, those theater goers got what was coming to them. And it was a big moment in Richmond. And I loved that story so much that, it's always haunted me. And I've actually been to the place where the theater, like they built a church on top of the place where the theater used to be. Like that's how far it went. They were like, now we put a church on top of it to just show those theatrical heathens, how much business we make. But I had that story in my mind, and I've tried to tell that story a million different ways and failed every single time. But I got this opportunity to write for American Vampire, which is Scott Snyder's comic series. He started it with Stephen King. It had been going for years, several issues, and then every so often they bring in other writers to write an issue or whatever, and then they collect them in an anthology. And I got to write one, and the one I got to write was basically what if the night of the Richmond Theater fire of 1811, there was a vampire in the theater. And so basically it's like this poor, like, what if the fire started because there was a vampire attack and bad vampire things happen, and this public, this national crisis event that happened that everybody knows about, but what they don't really know about is that there was a vampire in the house.
So here's what I'm thinking right now. I'm thinking Midnight Mass owes you royalties.
Oh man, I love
huge
that
spoiler
show.
there. I just completely spoiled all of Midnight Mass by saying that. But
Ixnay on the vampire. Nay.
Pyre, see? Pyre, fire.
Yeah.
No,
I love
but
Midnight Mass.
Yeah, but I mean, it's,
I mean, there wasn't any like,
Dude, I'm trying to get you Netflix money.
Those checks clear. They clear.
I would hope so. Um, you and I have way too much fun, I feel like, when you're on.
I mean, I feel terrible because whatever educational value this may hold, I feel like goes straight out the window. But
I disagree because
it.
like you've I mean, early on, especially, right, you talked about like this connection you made, right, that you didn't even know you had made, which this is one of the more valuable things, right? And
Yeah.
this person just remembered you 10 years later, and it led to something sort of like major in your life.
Yeah. Always be nice to your students. That's the lesson, right? Right?
Yeah.
Right? Maybe. Yeah. Sure. No. I mean, but in a like in the complete kismet kind of like pay it forward way, like you just never know. I mean, you never know. And, you just have to stay alive long enough for someone else to grow up and become successful so that they could be like,
so you can clutch the coattail.
I mean, yeah, like on a personal level, I feel as if I am only going to be as successful as the people around me who believe in me are. And, it doesn't happen every day and it doesn't happen with everybody. But like, I feel like if I can convince one person to believe in me, they're like, here's the thing. Do you want to do this thing? And I'll be like, yes, that sounds amazing.
We believe in you, Clay. Juan and I believe in you.
And you had me back. That's the amazing thing.
Because we had so much fun. And faith. See, Juan is interjecting in here. This is
fun and faith. He didn't interject last time. So this is
this is actually the first time I think Juan's interjected on an episode.
This is progress. Guys, we have bonded.
It's all on me. So I'm trying to think of a good transition here because now I don't have one because we've been very circuitous. It's interesting. You grew up a DC kid, let's say. We already discussed in our last interview that you were definitely an 80s kid, which I think is self-evident. No offense.
Man.
Your book, right?
Yeah. Should I get out the...
I got one this time. So your book, Whisper Down the Lane, right? Your book relies heavily on the 80s, relies on the satanic panic of the 80s. Cultural event. You experienced your own sort of like pop cultural informing during the 80s. I mean, you cited the Tim Burton 89 Batman as this massive influence. Is that in 2021 a point of return for you as nostalgia? Is it something you look back toward? Is it something you continue to draw on? Or pop culturally, have you moved beyond it?
The 80s in particular?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I feel like the 80s is a really charged period, and it kind of confounds me and enamors me at the same time. Where like, you're right. I grew up in the 80s. I imbibed everything that was in the 80s. Like those were my formative years of Gremlins, you name it, like that was Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Poltergeist, like, those were that was my diet. And I love John Carpenter, and I always find it interesting to kind of see the next generation or the next 2-3 generations kind of have that kind of similar kind of rehashing of Carpenterisms into their own work. And now we're in this kind of land of Carpenter, the synth, soundtrack, or the like these kind of touchstones to either his filmmaking in particular or just the 80s in general. And I'm critical of it. It's an easy thing to imbibe. Like I'll watch Stranger Things. I enjoyed, what was it? The Guest, by, oh my God, I'm blanking on his name. I'm losing points right now.
I don't know this one. So
it was Adam Wingard. The film he did after You're Next, with Dan from Downton Abbey. Yeah. Anyway, we're all getting through our 80s. We're making our 80s thing, and I guess Whisper Down the Lane was my 80s thing, so I have to cop to it, because it was like a total. I mean, it's not historically accurate by any stretch. It's not factual. Like you know, I've had reviewers, be like, on February 3rd, 1983, that didn't happen. That happened on October 4th, 1986. And it's like, I'm being mean, and I should apologize, but like, I think
now it's on recording, so you're fine.
I mean, we process the 80s in this kind of like, it's never actually the 80s anymore. It's like a layer of 80s. It's the patina of 80s. It's the like veneer, the pastel tracksuit. Like it's a vibe more than it is the actual artifact. And I'm guilty of it. I imbibe it. Like it's inevitable, I think, because it's something that we all think fondly to. When I see like 90s reduxes, I'm just kind of like, that makes no sense. But like the 80s, like I get it. But like, yeah, I don't know.
The 80s had so many like pop cultural reiterations, right? Now there is like the current zeitgeist, I guess, because we're coming up on such a long gestation period. The 90s are starting to pop up, and I hope they continue because my book is on the 90s. But you still do have Stranger Things being made and stuff. I mean,
well, we have like a Ghostbusters movie coming out in like
we
a
do,
week
but
or
you
two.
got VHS 1994 coming up.
That's true. That is true.
You've got that 90s show coming up as a reboot of that 70s show.
Are you kidding me? For real?
For real.
Wow. They just said like the 80s is done. Let's just hop to the 90s.
The show's been off for that many years to take it from the 70s to the 90s.
Is it the same people? Same characters?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Topher Grace?
Kelsey Grammer still obsessed with remaking Frasier. Will and Grace recently came back. So, I mean, there is this now odd 90s renaissance happening, but we're in 2021. It took quite a while for that to happen. There was almost an immediacy with the 80s. Like the 80s existed again in the 90s. Like American Psycho, right, came out 2000, I think, as a movie. But the book looking back to the 80s is just, and particularly in horror, right? There's just a dwelling on the 80s.
Yeah, I mean, the 80s was a great time for horror. The Reagan slasher, the unstoppable, unkilling capitalist Jason Voorhees coming at you. Like, I think like it was amazing. I must break you.
You're Khrushchev now. We will crush you.
By like Count Chocula or something.
I ate Count Chocula for breakfast this morning, man.
No. See, we're on the wavelength.
I actually bought something. Speaking of weird Halloween foods, I didn't know when to introduce this tonight, but you've given me the transition.
All right, I'm ready for it.
I bought this Thinking of You actually this weekend. I don't know if you know this exists. Do you see what it is?
Are they gummy worms?
It's candy corn, but it's Thanksgiving turkey and apple pie and coffee candy corn.
Oh my God.
And I don't know why I was thinking of you so much in relationship to this, but
you knew.
I need to show this to Clay.
That's amazing.
And it's got like a cranberry sauce flavor piece of candy corn. It's got a green bean, a sage stuffing. Like when I first saw this on the internet, I thought it was fake, but this is a great pop cultural moment here. And of course, a turkey flavored one. I haven't opened it because I'm afraid to. And I also feel like this is a wonderful time capsule that I need to keep and preserve because it's also like a cultural abomination.
Oh my God.
But it exists. Amazing. And I wanted to show it to you. So now that I've
Happy
shown it to
Thanksgiving.
you, I want you to react to the fact that this exists as my most eloquent speaker on pop culture that I've had.
I am
in the history of this program.
Oh my god. Candy corn jumped the shark. Like
So he's
that's
gone mute
I can't believe that they just go straight to
Clay, we can't hear you, or I can't hear you.
Wait, you can't hear me?
We can all hear him.
Apparently everybody else can hear you, but I can't.
Can you hear me now?
See what's going on?
Can you hear me now? Matthew
I'm connected to my headphones. This is fun.
Well, he's singing.
I'm gonna
Is he
sing
singing?
to you and only you. Everybody else can hear me now, but not you. If you just ask a
I
question,
really
like
can't hear him.
now,
You can?
I cannot.
basically, I'm going to take this opportunity to say thank you for you at home watching tonight.
It
Was
says
that
I'm
the, like-
connected to my AirPods.
I want a new drug. One that won't make me sick. One that won't make me down too high. My haze too thick. I want a new drug. One that won't make me sick.
Put him back in the case.
I hear him through your.
One that won't make me happy. Psst. Wondering what to do. Psst. Wondering what I feel like when I feel like I'm with you. I'm alone with you.
This is wild.
No.
Pass me the mouse.
Say what?
Pass me the mouse.
What's the next Huey Lewis song I can sing for the folks at home?
We're still working on it, Clay.
No, I'm just jamming. What's the power of love? It's the power of love. I can't do that one. Does anyone at home know this one? The power of love.
I like that he's going full.
No, it's because now I've got new drug in my head. I can't think of how to sing Power of Love. But it's the song from Back to the Future. And
It's the Brock's people sent some sort of virus to me for dissing their candy corn.
Yeah, that's what it is.
What is it?
I thought it was going to be the Disney people.
Power of love.
But it's the Brock's people.
I can't do it. I'm stuck.
Okay.
Yeah, they're just not connecting.
Power of love. You'd think I would get it at a certain point, but I just can't. Like it's, if I knew like the next verse or the next lyric.
Hey, I can hear you now.
Hey, we're back.
We're back.
Don't edit that out. That has to be in
We're
the show,
live.
right?
It's not going to be edited.
Oh, yes, that's right. Oh my God. Who is watching this at home? That's what I want to know.
My mom.
Thank you for tuning in.
Wow. I will tell we've had a couple of gremlins. We have had a couple of different audio issues over the course of this year. And you were the first person to provide their own concert during it. Because I could hear you through Juan's headset that was lying on top of his desk as he came to help me try to figure out why my headphones decided like, I don't want to listen to your interview anymore.
I got stuck on Huey Lewis in the News because you mentioned
because American Psycho.
American Psycho, and then we're just talking about the 80s. But like, what's the? I mean, hip to be square, yeah. But what was
also
the
obsessed
song?
with Whitney Houston. Everybody always leaves that part out about Patrick Bateman.
Was that also in the movie or just the book?
Both.
Okay.
All right. I'm going to steer us back on a course here.
You can try. You can
I'm
try.
going to
Bring
try.
it.
I'm going to
Come
try.
on down. I'm here.
You and your possums. It's because I said
ready.
the Brocks.
Don't. You're tempting fate again, my friend.
Yeah. You got to go buy a bag and feed them to your kids.
Ugh, they would hate it. Hey, I know you're going to steer us back, but can I talk about one horror comic that I'm personally proud of?
Yes.
If anyone out there is actually looking for a horror comic, and specifically a horror comic that I wrote, I would recommend this one, called Lazaretto. It came out on Boom Studios. I know this is like an improbable premise, but imagine a global pandemic happening on your very first day of your freshman year at college, and you're basically quarantined inside your dormitory along with everybody else, and you're not allowed out until everybody's symptom free, which is a true story that took place in I guess in the avian flu, swine flu days, like in like 2009, 2011. They would have these dormitories converted into self-isolation facilities, which is just a nicer way of saying quarantine. And basically entire dorms would just be turned into these spots where like nobody would be allowed out until a infectious cycle kind of came and went, and like food would be delivered to you, and I wrote about it. I wrote about like, what if it was like a really bad pandemic that like just like everything was really bad, but it just so happened to be your first day at school, at college, and what would that be like? And Boom Studios. I wrote it.
When?
And this came out in like 2017.
So 16? Give us a lotto numbers, Clay, because you're doing pretty good tonight.
Yeah. The paperback came out in 2018, if I'm reading this correctly. But yeah, it was amazing because like nobody read this goddamn thing. Like they like basically like this was like for me and me only, and like people would be like meh, meh. And then like all of a sudden I don't know if you're familiar with the coronavirus, but this pandemic hit, and it was amazing because like all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, like it's just like in the book. And yeah, it's not really the way it happened.
So you're a prophet is what you're revealing on the program tonight.
I basically wanted to just say to somebody, I told you so, but nobody ever listens to me. I have to come on your show and hijack it and basically like
and sing Huey Lewis and the News songs.
Yes, and hawk my wares, Lazaretto.
So
if you're not through with pandemic literature yet,
I don't know what to tell you. We played Alice Cooper and got like put in internet jail, and I don't know what it says about your singing that your rendition of Huey Lewis and the News did not get us put in internet jail.
Because it was really bad. It was a bad rendition.
Those so bad it
words, was indecipherable.
Clay. Those are your words.
Power of Love. Do you know how to sing Power of Love?
I don't. Probably with my mouth.
I just can't.
All right. Focus. Horror comics. What ones do you read that you aren't involved in?
Hands down, one of my favorite books, not just comic books, this graphic novel called Black Hole by Charles Burns. It's amazing. It's an amazing book. Like you got to read Black Hole. If I'm going to recommend anything, you gotta do that. I wish I had it with me. I don't. I brought 10 others with me, so I'm just going to bang through these because they're amazing. My favorite thing is Monsters by Emil Ferris. This thing is hand drawn. It is. I mean, it's astounding. You got to do it. You got to do it. Like, please, like for reals. That's a must. The autumnal. This is by Daniel Kraus. Totally good. Just came out on the Vault comics. Really spooky folk horror, if that's your thing. I'm gonna come off as a James Tinian the fourth fanboy here, so I'm just gonna get through all of his comics. The Nice House on the Lake. This is DC's Black Label. This is like issue 5 just came out. I think they're going up to 11, maybe 12. This is a must if you're into
I agree on that one.
stuff.
I subscribe to that one.
Yeah, it's really good, right? He writes effortlessly. And also his other comic, The Department of Truth. This is like a conspiracy theory horror, for all you tinfoil hat folks out there. Totally worth it. James and his partner, Steve Fox, release a quarterly magazine of comics called Razor Blades. And they're just now coming out with, I think issue 5 is on its way. You should totally check it out. Gideon Falls. This one is mind-blowing. It's really like I would like this one kind of like it recalibrates the way that one thinks, and that is it's a lovely book. This one, Road of Bones, I like, of all the ones I'm sharing, this is the one I'm the most jealous that I didn't write. Like I really love this one, and I'm really envious of the team that made it. And I would almost say the same thing for Blue and Green, but this is astounding. It's all about jazz musicians, jazz music, and the haunting of sound. It's really, this one is beautiful. This is a beautiful, scary comic. Infidel. I don't know if anyone's heard of this. This is a really good one too. Totally recommend it. And the last one, this one might be hard to find. It's called The Lot, and it's like Hollywood horror. And it's on this new comic independent label called Bad Idea. And it's, I don't know, like it's really gorgeous. Really well done. It's a really spooky ghost story, and I wholeheartedly recommend it. And it's only going to be 5 issues, maybe 4 issues, and no, 5 issues, and the 4th just came out. So wholeheartedly recommend all of those books.
A lot of indies there. No Marvel there. No DC there.
I mean, they don't need my help. You're gonna buy them anyways. The Dregs. Have you ever heard of the Dregs? You gotta get the Dregs. Zach and Lonnie wrote it, and it's amazing. You gotta get it. The Dregs. You're gonna do it. You got it.
Well, I mean, a lot of horror comics don't come through DC and Marvel. I mean, they do tend to be the indies that release the horror.
Yeah. I mean, I think what is it? DC is doing their Black Label thing now, which I think is like their horror imprint, or at least their adult themed stuff. Joe Hill has I feel like he has his like own imprint at DC.
Well, I mean, he goes
Marvel.
wherever he wants. I mean, he's like Neil Gaiman, right? Just wherever he wants to be, there he is.
Yeah, that guy.
I was going to ask you a Joe Hill question. I think I'm not going to, because I don't think you'll want me to.
I like Joe Hill.
No, it wasn't that. It was just, I mean, it's fascinating to me because, I mean, his name is Joe King, right? It's not Joe Hill, and it's not even his middle name. He shortened his middle name to be Joe Hill to sort of avoid this association with his dad, but he looks just like his dad. I mean, if you see a picture of Joe Hill, he looks like Stephen King. And so I just, one wonders about the authenticity of the relationship to one's success and placement.
Are you crying foul? Are you
I am, because I
suggesting-
mean, you get connections and however you get them, and I think you just need to own that personally. I mean, you talked about your student, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, same with like Nick Cage or something like that, or Anderson Cooper even, right? Now people
Yeah.
who super will never be on this program. Not that I think Joe Hill per se will be. But I mean, why not just, if you look just like your dad, who is Stephen King, and you're also writing horror.
I'll be frank, and I will say my only answer is, I remember when I first read his collection of short stories, 21st Century Ghosts, 20th Century Ghosts, 21st Century Ghosts, 20th Century Ghosts. I personally did not know that he was Stephen King's son. And I read that collection and I was blown away. God, there was this amazing, it's probably been over 20 years now since I read that book, but there are some amazing stories in there. And there's one that it's like a romance that takes place on the set for George Romero's Dawn of the Dead. And it's beautiful. It's astounding. And I just remember reading it and being like, this book is awesome. And I was like, who is this Joe Hill guy? And then this is early internet days. So Wikipedia or Google just wasn't, it just wasn't as immediate to do the dig. But I found him and I found out, and I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. This is the son of Stephen King. And I had this kind of internal conversation with myself where I was like, does that change the way that I feel about the book? No, the book was still great. And I do kind of appreciate selfishly that I didn't know that it was Stephen King's son going into the book, because I would be bringing all of that baggage and all of that criticalness that has nothing to do with him and everything to do with his family. And I feel like that's unfair. I don't know how he got the book deal. I don't know how he got started. All I know is personally, when I read that book and I had no idea who he was, because I just wasn't paying attention because I was a dumbass, I was blown away by it. I was like, this book's amazing. And then I learned it's Stephen King's son. And then maybe there was a millisecond where I was like, well, wait a minute. That's not fair. And then I was like, well, crack it.
I'm not saying you can't be good and be somebody's kid. That's not at all what I'm saying. But what I am saying is you do have access to opportunities and various other things that I feel like you're trying to hide or disregard in that relationship. And I mean, why not be that good and be somebody's kid? Why not just be forthcoming?
I mean, it has to be. I mean, I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine what it would be like to be Stephen King.
Because I was at the bookstore the other day. I was at Barnes & Noble the other day, right? And I like to check out what's in the horror section, which fortunately Whisper Down the Lane was. See, you got two plugs. And but the rest, I mean, the majority, of course, is Stephen King books, but then there's a good shelf and a half of Joe Hill stuff. And I'm just like,
I mean, they write good books. I wish there was more space for the rest of us lowly writers. I don't know. It's funny. We're all fighting for that.
I mean, I'm putting you on the spot because you actually have to work in this.
I mean, there's nothing I can say about Joe Hill. I mean, he writes good books. He sells books. I don't sell books. So
you sell books.
You bought a book. So I've sold one book.
Actually, you sent me a book. I didn't buy this.
Can't even sell the book. Damn it.
Everyone go buy the book. Go buy the book. You ever see The Critic with John Lovitz as Jay Sherman? Buy my book. I've seen plenty of people on Goodreads and Twitter posting about your book. Now he's gone mute. He's taking his headphones out. Why did you take your headphones out?
Can you hear me now?
I can.
Yeah. All right. Can you hear me? Say something.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
saying something.
My batteries died.
Okay. Can you hear me though?
Oh, I can totally hear you. I just wanted
Okay,
to
I thought you were just disgusted by my compliment of you.
I didn't hear a compliment. I heard, what did I hear? I heard you were like, no, what did you say? What did you?
No, I said I see people on Goodreads and Twitter all the time talking about your book in positive ways.
We're not going to spend this YouTube live chat discussing my neuroses of Goodreads and
You won't be the first nor the last person to have neuroses about Goodreads. I see plenty of authors I've spoken to anguish on social media over Goodreads deleting reviews.
like their own reviews.
Yeah.
Wow. Can you do that?
No, not like the site deleted the reviews, not the author.
But the author like writes in and is like, this review is.
No. They were just like, where did all my reviews go? Why did you delete why did you purge all these reviews?
Well, I am habitual. I have gotten better about going to Goodreads. I know I shouldn't, and I usually do. And for some asinine reason, I usually start my day going there.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that's like kind of like, oh yeah, like centering, humbling myself.
Very Buddhist approach to a writing practice, I imagine.
Yeah, it's like, how can I make myself feel like poop? I'll go. What are people saying about my book today? Oh, okay, let's start working on the next book.
Let me ask you some easier questions than these existential ones we've fallen into for whatever reasons.
I'm totally fine for them.
What was the sort of like influence to you in terms of like a horror comic? We talked a bit about Batman and stuff, but like a true horror comic. Like I don't think of Batman per se as a horror comic. There's certainly elements, but like, what's the one you might return to that's a bit older, not a current one that you showed us, but that's a little bit older, that mainstream or not, you sort of still think about?
I will argue that The Killing Joke is a horror comic, even if it is a Batman comic. But that, I mean, yeah, but just that one. Arkham Asylum, oh my God. Dave McKean, his artwork is astounding. Dave McKean did a comic with Neil Gaiman way back when called Mr. Punch. And I go back to that one on occasion, less for the story and more for Dave McKean's artwork. For whatever reason, like I think I had like a weird Mr. Punch phase in high school or in college.
Okay.
I don't know why, but I collected antique Mr. Punch puppets. It just so I think it was because of the Dave McKean, Neil Gaiman graphic novel. It was my first experience with like the Punch and Judy shows. It was, that to me felt really horrifying. I returned to that one. I feel like maybe I mentioned this the last time we talked, or maybe it was a different interview, but there's this bizarre comic called A Cotton Candy Autopsy.
No, we definitely did not talk about
did
that.
not
I
talk
would
about
recall that.
Okay. I mean, the only claim to fame now, I guess, that this comic has, this obscure independent God, I don't even know what the publisher was. I don't even remember who the writer or the artist was, but it's a cotton candy autopsy, and all of the artwork was like, looked like faint pencil drawings. But if you were ever a fan of Mr. Bungle growing up, Mike Patton's side project from Faith No More, their first album, the artwork for its first album were images taken directly from a cotton candy autopsy. And it's basically about drunk, rowdy birthday party clowns. It's like clowns, but not Pennywise, not like demon clowns, but just like human beings, completely and utterly besotted, ruining the lives of children everywhere. And like, what is the mental state of a man or woman who wears face paint and basically like heaps ridicule and kind of physical violence upon themselves at these children's birthday parties. It's an astounding comic. God, I haven't looked at it in a while, but just talking about it makes me want to go back to it.
So maybe a resurrection in your future.
I know. It's just downstairs. I could get it right now. It's like right there. I know where it is on the bookshelf. It's like I could picture it in my head. It's a good one.
Since Carnage is coming to the big screen, I'm wondering what your thoughts are as a fan, and sort of where we began too, of translations.
Cinematically?
Of the various ones, and what ones have worked for you. I mean, Preacher was on AMC, which struck me as strange, because I also thought Preacher was pretty unfilmable.
I think I watched the first season of Preacher, and it was pretty good.
Yeah.
Like I enjoyed it. I commend Seth Rogen and Evan. I'm awful with names tonight. His creative partner, producing partner. But I mean, I know we've talked a lot about Batman, but I do think that Tim Burton Batman holds up. Cinematic adaptations of comics
or television.
I stuck with The Walking Dead for a little too long.
Did you watch them go out to sea as well?
No. Well, that's the other option.
Yeah, I was curious if you watched that.
I've watched the first season of it. But yeah, I'm trying to think of like, why am I drawing a blank on solid adaptations? Maybe it's just because where our discussion is.
How about like From Hell? Did you?
I watched it. I never went back to it. I do think, I think there's something to be said about The Empty Man, which is loosely based off of Cullen Bunn's comic series, which was also for Boom. That was, I think I think we get kind of into this problematic space where the movies pay lip service to the comics without acknowledging necessarily that they come from the comics. So I think a lot of creators.
What about something like Creepshow then?
Creepshow was great because it was a movie inspired by comics that then got turned into a comic, which was inspired by the movie. So I feel like it's kind of mirrors upon mirrors.
And now you have a TV series.
Now they have a TV series, yeah. Do they have a new comic book series? That's the question. Like, should they?
Waxwork.
Oh yeah.
Which is more of a record company.
They
every once in a while releases a Creepshow comic.
Wow, that's sweet. I like that. I think Creepshow, the original, and maybe the second, they were great. I
like the second. A lot of people don't because it's a smaller anthology, but I actually like some of like The Raft. I think is a quite good story.
I mean, The Raft is the one that we talk about. That's the
Well, I like Old Chief Woodenhead too. I mean, it's got a lot of issues, but I like it as a story.
Yeah. And then there's the third one, which is basically the the hitchhiker that just gets,
Oh yeah, where the woman hits him, and
yeah. Was it just those three?
it might be because the first one had 5, if I remember.
Yeah. Yeah, they kind of skimmed out on the second one.
Well, it didn't have the same. I mean, Romero didn't direct it.
The Raft, I would probably, if we were ranking all the installments for both the first and the second, The Raft would easily be my first choice.
Oh, interesting.
And then I would go through all of part 1 and then come back and maybe put Chief Woodenhead and the Hitchhiker at the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like the Leslie Nielsen one with
Ted Danson.
Yeah, with Ted Danson, yeah.
Yeah. And he's like up to his end. He's like, I can hold my breath for a long, long time.
Yeah, that one. So are you passing on this legacy of horror comics to your sons?
I'm trying. Actually, no, I take that back. I am not trying. I am trying to protect them from horror for as long as possible.
Okay. But they've already stumbled upon Sleepy Hollow.
Sleepy Hollow is, I mean, like my oldest, I mean, I honestly, like, you know, I didn't inflict the Headless Horseman onto him. He said, I want to be the Headless Horseman. And for me, I'm like, whoa, that's crazy. Where did that come from? Let's watch the movie. Let's read, you know, I mean, we could read the book, but it felt like the Disney, I wanted to show him the Disney film because that scared me as a kid. And I was like, are you ready to be scared by this thing? And he's like, okay. And we watched it and he was just like, meh. So, I mean, my son has read a decent amount of Venom comics at this point, just because of what I've written. But I can't let him see these things. Like they're not, he like, I am personally not psychologically ready to say, this is what I do while you're asleep at night. I'm here in the attic.
And when you're talking to me.
Yes.
My skull mug.
Because then it becomes like, that's what dad does. Like dad is that person. And like they already know that, like, when, you know, if their mother's putting them in bed down and I'm downstairs, like dad's probably watching a spooky movie.
I'll give you a juxtaposition point to that from this summer. Daniel Volpe was on, and he writes like splatter gore stuff. And he did his interview from the nursery.
Oh my God.
And it was just so surreal because you're talking about his book Talia. It was just so surreal to be talking about this like demon prostitute while he was sitting in a nursery.
Wow.
So there's that, just to put that out there for you. One final question for you before we all go out and find our nearest comic book store and buy a bunch of things we haven't read. I'm really curious about this Richmond vampire because I'm a Virginian myself. And what's the legacy here? When's this coming out? What can we expect?
Oh my God. Are you being cheeky and talking about?
No, I really want to know.
Well, it's funny. It's not so much that I'm writing about the Richmond vampire of Richmond.
Oh, so you're just teasing us. Okay.
Well, no. I mean, yes and no. I have a new book coming out in September, and I'm in a tug of war right now with the title. So it doesn't have a title. It has like 5 titles, and it takes place. This is the most I've talked about it publicly. So,
it's like Connie Chung interviewing Newt Gingrich's mom. It's just between us. There's a 90s reference for everybody out there.
I get it. I found it. I know it. It takes place in Richmond, and the opening scene is about. Well, I'm not gonna say what it's about, but it talks a lot about the vampire of Richmond. Like, I just love that story. Like, I grew up with that story. I mean, you're not from Richmond.
No, I'm from Shincotig.
That's right. But have you heard of the vampire of Richmond?
I did when I went to William and Mary.
Okay. So you know Hollywood Cemetery overlooking the
I've
James
been
River.
there.
He walks the road.
And then the Poe house.
Yes, he's there. He's like some Lestat style kind of like moody goth dude who maybe was the spirit of someone who died in the collapse of the Chaco train tunnel bridge, or maybe he was some dude who was like kicked out of London for being a vampire and for some reason like came to Richmond, and like there's so many different kind of like versions of his story, but nobody knows.
So this is coming out in 11 months.
Yes.
All right. So are you coming back and talking to us next time about that then?
Oh my God, I would love to. If you're still
So I can hold up that book.
Yes.
And tell people to buy that book then.
Yes. And it will have a title by then.
Excellent.
But like it's like a little like the beginning has a little motif about the Richmond vampire. And it was me kind of paying lip service to my hometown. Because I miss it. I miss Richmond.
Well, we're glad you spent some time with us tonight, and we're glad you did too, even through our technical issues between Clay's headphones dying and mine wanting to die, it seems. And also the fact that you now know that this horrifying thing exists in the world. I invite you to tune in tomorrow night when we learn about monsters in the Hebrew Bible with Esther Himori. And I also invite you to take our survey that Juan is dropping into the various chats right now. And as always, stay spooky. Thank you, sir.
Hey, was that okay?
I was great. I hope you had fun.
Oh, I had a blast. I always have a blast with you, but I always feel like I always second guess the the educational quality of it. But as long as you're not concerned, I won't be.
No, I think people engage in different ways with stuff. I think if this wasn't accessible, I don't know what accessibility is in terms of getting into something.
Yeah.
Plus, everybody got like a ton of recommendations. I got a ton of recommendations. I didn't know like half the comics you showed at the end there.
Hey, awesome.
So, I was surprised you didn't show Something is Killing the Children.
I read like a couple issues. I thought it was okay. It didn't get me. I get why it gets other people, but it hasn't gotten me.
Okay. Yeah, everybody keeps talking to me about it, and I bought volume 1 and 2. I came to comics really late. I didn't read comics as a kid.
Yeah. But do you read them now?
I do. It wasn't that I wasn't allowed to. I grew up in Shincotig, so we didn't exactly have a comic store. We had the Grub Steak, which was like a weird convenience store that made subs that sold comics.
Did it have the wire spinner?
Yeah, exactly. But it wasn't like a real comic store, and the bookstore on the island didn't sell comics at all. And honestly, probably the first ones I really read were Preacher.
Really?
When they were in the hardback, and I borrowed them from my friend Jason Manning.
Wow. So you, like, no joke, Preacher is your